It's time for our second real assignment with Adobe Illustrator. That first one was mostly just about connecting, trying to get it to work. This one is about using the swatches panel to fill some shapes with things other than solid colors. We're going to look at gradients and patterns today. It is not a complicated assignment. So I've got this handout that you're looking at right now is posted, and you can refer to it if you need to. But this is going to be a matter of creating an artboard, making some shapes, filling some of the shapes with gradients, then filling some with patterns, and then that's it. All right, I'm not trying to make big hard things here right before spring break. All right, so I am today in this movie, I am already connected to the remote desktop. I'm already connected to Google File Stream. If you need to watch the instructions for those things, go back and use one of the movies from the previous days because I showed all of that. I'm not going to show it in this movie. I'm just going to go to work, right? I've already got everything all connected and ready to go. So I'm going to hit the Windows button here, and I will go find Illustrator. I didn't start Illustrator yet, obviously, but I'll fire that up, and I'm going to go through the entire assignment, but it's pretty short. So this movie will be much shorter than the last few have been because I'm not going through all the connection stuff. All right, so I'm going to do Create New when the splash screen gets all loaded up. I like to do Print, Letter. I like Landscape Orientation a little bit better, partly because I'm recording this, but you could do whatever. It doesn't matter. All right, so I'm just going to make it a landscape artboard. There we go. I'll close this tour window, and we're ready to roll. Now, the first thing I'm gonna ask for 5 shapes that are shaped with gradients, or filled with gradients. But I'm going to go up here to the Window menu, and I'm going to click on the Swatches panel. Now, the Swatches panel will float out here. You can put it wherever you want. And I'll show you here in just a minute how I'm going to use that Swatches panel. So that was the Window menu and Swatches. Now what I got to do is make 5 shapes, and I don't really care what they are. You could make boxes. They could all be different. They could all be the same thing. It doesn't matter to me. You need 5 shapes, and I'm doing things that we did like in that previous assignment. All right, I'm just coming along here. I'll move that panel out of the way for a second, and I'll go back and use some rectangles again, and maybe another circle. Make whatever you want. Doesn't matter. All right, there we go. 5 shapes. Cool. All right, now the next thing here, these are going to need to be filled with gradients. By the way, remember that if you need to move or resize a shape, do that with the black arrow. All right, make sure you switch back to the black arrow tool before you try to move any of these shapes around or resize them or anything like that. On the Swatches panel, I'm going to click in the bottom left-hand corner of the Swatches panel. There's a button that says Libraries. So I'm going to click that. And then I'm looking on these 5, I want gradients. So I'm looking on this pop-out, fly-out menu. Are there gradients? Well, yes, there are. They're right here. Now, once I get to gradients, I've got all kinds of choices. And this is where you make up your mind. You look at these sets of gradients that have popped out like gems and jewels or simple radial, stone and brick. Whatever sounds good to you, go get it. All right? So maybe I'll go to brights. And these are all kind of brightly colored, right? So they're gradients. So if I drag it, I can drop it on the shape, and bingo, there we go. Now, I want these all to have 5 different gradients. And somebody might ask me, well, could I, for example, I have this panel open of brights, and those are all gradients. Could I, if I wanted to, just pick 5 out of there? The answer is yes, if that's what you want to do. But if you're the exploring, curious type, you might want to go back to that library button, go back to gradients, and go look at something else if you wish. And I'm not telling you that you have to, but I'm telling you that you can, right? You could switch it up anytime. So I just switched it to the collection of gradients called metals, and so I'll pull some of those out, drop them in there. I just want you to fill these shapes with 5 different gradients. Not a complicated thing. Those are done. All right. I'm going to get these panels out of the way because now what I got to do is move on. There's 5 of these, and I would like for them to be filled with gradients. All right, time for 5 more shapes here. So I'm going to come along here. I'll just make it. Again, if you want to, these could all, and you know, when you draw the next shape, it might come up with whatever you drew with last, right? You saw for a second that first circle I drew had, it had a gradient on it because that was the last thing I used. Illustrator tends to do that. And remember, your black arrow is the tool that you can use to select different objects that you have on your artboard. We're just learning how to use this a little bit. We'll get fancier later, as fancy as e-learning lets you get. All right, well this time it's patterns. So I'll just go ahead and close this metals panel here. I don't really need it anymore. So I'm going to go back to that same library button that was on the swatches panel. Here it is. And this time I'm looking for patterns. So now if you look carefully, these are alphabetical, but if you look carefully, there it is, patterns. When you get to patterns, there are 3 branches that are going to pop out. There's basic, decorative, and nature. You could go any direction here. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to show you where to find it, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. So you could go basic, you could go decorative, you could go nature if you want to, and you'll see subdivisions under each of those. Like basic has dots and lines and textures. Decorative has this thing called Decorative Legacy and Vonster. And then nature has animal skins and foliage. A lot of people really like the animal skins. So I'll pull that up. And then there's a set of, these are patterns, and they are all different animal skins. So for example, if I take this over and okay, I just filled that with zebra. And again, somebody probably is wondering, so does that mean that I could just fill that with 5 different animal skins? Yes, if that's what you want to do, that's okay with me. Or if you're the more curious, exploring type, you could go back to that library button, go back to patterns, and go to something else. And I've got the Decorative Legacy panel out here. And so I could pull a few things over out of that and just see what we get. And I'm not going to be picky about it. What I'm trying to do is get you to, accidentally had something selected there, but that's all right. I'm trying to get you to know where some things are and see some options and see how it works a little bit. So really, you know, when you've got something like this, I have 5 shapes up top that are filled with gradients. I have 5 shapes down at the bottom that are filled with patterns. That's it. I'm going to go ahead and close these panels. Assignment's done. It's not hard, and it's not a long thing, really. It's just about knowing where to find things. Where did I get all that? Well, window, swatches, library button, and then I was able to find gradients right there, and I was able to find patterns right there. Okay, so you got to know where to find things if you're going to be able to do things. Now, saving time, so I'm already connected to Google File Stream, so I'm going to do a file and a save as, and right here it is on the left-hand side. I know that some of you have sent me emails and things that said I couldn't get it to connect. Well, all right, so if you can't get it to connect, then take a screenshot. Take a screenshot of your work. I'll accept a screenshot. That's fine. Google Drive right there. And you have to double click on My Drive. If you just select Google Drive and then try to save it, it's not going to work. You have to double click on My Drive, and then you could put it inside a folder if you have folders or whatever. I'm just going to call this Fills, because that's what I was doing. I was filling it with things, so I'm just going to call it Fills, F-I-L-L-S, and I will save that. I'll click OK on the Illustrator options. All right. That is, and you got to give it a second. You can't just like close Illustrator immediately. It takes a second to do it. All right, so that's saved. I'm going to go ahead and click File, and I'll click Exit, and I'll get out of Illustrator. And I'm going to go ahead and click the Start bin. I don't have anything else open here, nothing else really running. So I'm going to click the Start button, Power, and Shut Down. And that will disconnect me from the desktop. And again, just to prove that that this worked, I just went I went to a different tab, not the one where I was on the tab where I was on the remote desktop on the horizon.planefield thing. That's disconnected now. I switched tabs over to my Google Drive, and oh, look, right there. There's that fills file that I just created. So it really does work. I mean, when everything goes right, it really does work. Okay, Fist bump, off we go, try it out.